I've played 3 missions of Star Wars Outlaws, interviewed the developers one-on-one, and I've got some exclusive information about this game thanks to Ubisoft, who did fly me out to LA for Ubisoft Forward. So what I've done here in this video is break it down into 10 easy to follow sections for you with all of the key takeaways and important information I think you should know before you either decide to buy the game or before you even play it. But first of all, I'm going to share my honest opinion of the limited time that I did have with the game. And I think it's pretty positive, to be honest with you. In fact, I ended up wanting to play more by the time my session was over. And for full clarity, Ubisoft have not sponsored this video. That is my genuine and honest opinion. And while I've been making this video for you, it's actually been super fun because I'm going over all of the things that I experienced in game, and I'm looking forward to playing more of it in the coming months. Now, as for the quality of gameplay that you're watching or going to watch throughout this preview video, I played it on PC at 4K 60 FPS. And when I asked the devs if these settings would transfer over to the consoles, they wouldn't tell me, but they did give me a huge grin. So I think this performance does seem pretty promising across the board 2 months out from release. This game will also take 25 to 30 hours to complete if you just focus on the story, and 50 to 60 hours for that 100% completion or platinum achievement, as confirmed by the creative director Julian Geraghty, who I also had the pleasure of meeting and chatting to briefly at the event. He is a terrific guy and a big Star Wars fan. Now, as for the 3 missions I played, I started with a quest called The Wreck, where I had to explore a High Republic cruiser in search for a navigation computer, followed by The Relic, where I had to stealth into a Crimson Dawn base and steal an item on behalf of the Yashiga clan, and our 3rd mission, False Flag, where I had to escape into space in the Trailblazer ship and got to experience some space combat. But before we get chatting about dogfighting, let's actually talk about ground combat, because there are some really good things here, and also, to be honest, a few things which I'm not too fond of. First of all, it may be obvious to some of you, but there is no force powers in this game or lightsabers, as you play as Kay Vess, who is a scoundrel and a thief. And as someone who has just come off the back of platinuming Jedi Survivor, it did take me a little moment to get used to, and that's because there are only 2 offensive options for you in this game. You can either stun or kill with your blaster, or initiate a stealth takedown with your fists. And with that in mind, the closest comparison I can make here is with Star Wars Battlefield 2, where after your blaster overheats in combat, you will have to wait until it cools down to use it again, or hit the reload meter in this kind of timed minigame, as you can see here, which if you do press it within the green section, you'll be able to get back into combat faster and fire more blaster bullets, which means gun management ends up being the key to combat in this game. And as some enemies have plasma shields, you'll then need to remove them by switching to your ion blaster mode to then get rid of it, and then after that's done, you then need to switch back to your power shot or either your stun or kill mode to then eliminate the enemy, with your stun mode specifically allowing you to one-shot enemies with the RB button that also operates on a cooldown. You can also pick up blaster cannons and rifles off enemies, but you can't keep them forever, so just think of it as a kind of temporary ultimate move where you can cut through enemies real swiftly, just like in Avatar Massive's most recent release with the RPGs, which pretty much just one-shots enemies, and the same mechanic here kind of applies. And with all that in mind, what I would say is I did find myself spending more time switching back and forth between the correct 3 gun modes in combat and then trying to time my reload minigame click correctly, rather than actually getting stuck in with some high velocity, fast paced gunslinging. And perhaps combat will flow more freely as we do get more used to switching between our different blaster options, but at its core, it is a ranged gun combat game with cooldowns, so just remember that before you do jump into playing, and I think you'll be fine. Your expectations will be managed. But if you're not firing off blaster bullets, then you're going to be stealthing around compounds and using Nyx, your companion, to assist you. And I was pleased to see that the Massive team have implemented a stealth takedown option here in Outlaws, as they did not implement one in their recent Avatar game. In fact, they do try to encourage you to play in a stealth manner, because as you can see here in the bottom left hand corner, if you do hold LB or L1 on your controller, you activate an overlay for Nyx, where you can either get him to attack, which doesn't then kill the target, but does stun them for a short period of time, so you can then run in for a quick stealth takedown. Or if you aim to the side of the NPC. As you can see here, you can get Nix to distract them and then subsequently move that enemy into a more favorable position, kind of like throwing a rock in the Horizon games if you've played them. Alternatively, you can steal, which allows you to gain credits or obtain special quest items without being discovered, or you can actually detonate specific enemies who have a grenade on their waistband, which Nix then activates while you remain hidden and in cover. Now, on top of that, Nix can activate traps of nearby vents or explosive crates, which will of course explode if an NPC interacts with it. So this kind of stealth management where you sit back and execute your offensive moves with Nix at range, maybe music to the ears of you who like to play that way, or not really, kind of beating around the bush here. It may be a little bit slow, a little bit methodical for some of you, but in that case, just ignore all of Nix's abilities and then just run in and blast everyone away. But then you won't be using a kind of big part of your offensive arsenal in this game. So trying to balance the two here in this game will be key to maximizing your offense and defensive abilities, in my opinion. Now, movement and parkour is a big positive from me because Kay does respond quite well. And even though I don't have my own captured footage here, I was throwing Kay around a lot and spamming dodge, slide, sprint, jump, and the grapple buttons to kind of get a feel of how this game deals with the quick responsiveness of triggered commands. And I am really pleased to say that it was solid. In fact, the parkour felt eerily similar to Jedi Fallen Order and Survivor, with those kind of climbing grates dotted around the map as the main apparatus to grab onto throughout the level design. But of course, instead of using force jumps, we used the grapple gun to swing across certain areas, which then had me feeling like I was again back in a Horizon game because of the lack of space wizard powers. So in my opinion, it is a mixture between the two, and the animations and physics felt pretty smooth. That said, because you'll need to jump across decent distances in this game, I did feel that the jump animation kind of felt a little bit like floaty, kind of like it went on a little bit too long, which then threw me out of the immersion while playing this game. And I wish I could show you that here in this gameplay, but I did feed that back to the development team, and hopefully it does get touched up or improved a little bit before launch because it was noticeable. You also can't manually interact with cover, which means you need to physically move Kay and place her behind a physical wall or crate, but you won't get any in-game feedback that you are indeed behind it and protected. And then a few times I had myself crouched behind an object here, and I still kind of got hit by blasters because my big toe was kind of just poking out of line of sight. And even though massive, the studio behind this game also created the Division 1 and 2, do not expect Division movement mechanics here in Outlaws, which could be a positive as the game then does flow a lot better and it doesn't feel like a chess movement board per se, which you kind of feel in the Division sometimes, as you can sprint and slide into cover like in Call of Duty or Fortnite. But that could also be a negative, as you can get detected and shot at by enemies if your positioning isn't on point. Now, if you are enjoying this breakdown so far, please do leave a very swift like down below. And if you do end up giving the game a go, please do consider using the Andy Reloads credit code at Ubisoft checkout, because you will get 1 penny or 1 cent off your purchase, which is absolutely outstanding, I know. But jokes aside, I really do appreciate the support. These videos do take some time to make, and I will pop that link down below in the pinned comments. Now, ship combat. If you've played Star Wars Squadrons before, then this will feel super familiar because it's pretty much the same here, if not exactly the same, as all the mechanics from that game are here in this one. For starters, you have 3 offensive abilities whilst flying, that being the unlimited blaster machine guns, which is your bread and butter when dogfighting, but also rockets are available for you, which have a cooldown timer, but they are of course one-shot kills if you do lock on and successfully hit a target. And then we also have the turret here, which when activated fires a controlled burst of blasters when in range of an enemy. We also have the ship boost that allows us to kind of close up between enemy fighters quicker or get away from them if we are in a bit of a tight spot, and we can press down on the D-pad to repair, which is this button here if I just zoom in for you. Now, on top of that, you can hold the LT or L2 button when you're near an enemy ship to pretty much auto fly this Trailblazer and keep the target in your kill zone, which when I used, I kind of felt like I was cheating, as it was pretty simple to then eliminate the TIE fighter, but you can change this in the settings menu if you want to then make it more challenging if you wish. Now, what was different here is that when you press down on your right joystick, you can activate a radar option, which then pops up points of interest that you can visit in your vicinity when you're not in combat. Now, a good example of why this is useful is the communication tower here, which will clear your wanted level, or you can activate a fast travel location on a specific planet when you fly close enough to then activate that landing sequence. So there will be activities in space, such as docking with orbital space stations or trading platforms, as was confirmed to me by the developers when I spoke to them, and not just occasionally fighting random enemy flight squadrons on the edge of space, which is a huge positive in my opinion. Otherwise it gets boring real quick. And this brings us quite nicely onto exploration, because the first thing that I do want to commend the massive team on is the transition from traveling from space to then a surface of the planet, because it felt like a great compromise between a loading screen like in Starfield and the space to surface freedom that we have in No Man's Sky. Of course, I would love this game to operate this transition like No Man's Sky does, where we have complete freedom over our ship, where we blast through the atmosphere of a planet, but at least it's not a 10-second cutscene like Starfield, which I very much dislike to this day. Now, as for running around and exploring this world, that is one thing that I wish I could have done more of in this preview, as all three missions were structured and quite linear, to be fair. In fact, there was one point where I kind of jumped on a speeder bike and zoomed out of town, only to be told by Sai that I had to then return to the main area. So in that regard, it's something I wish that they had shown us more of, and not just a linear A to B quest, as it's one of the game's unique selling points, right? And something that the developers have spoken fondly to me about when I interviewed them, and we've seen throughout all of the trailers and gameplay previews, is about exploring this Star Wars open world and experiencing it for ourselves. But it is also like a Metroidvania game, Julian Girardi said, which means that you may discover certain areas or locations on a planet that you can't access at that time, as you don't have a specific ability or skill to circumvent or unlock it. You have to kind of come back to it at a later date after you've upgraded your blaster enough to be able to blow a hole through a wall, essentially, which will be very familiar to those of you who have played Fallen Order or Jedi Survivor, as it's kind of designed in the same way. But what I would say is the brief time that I had walking through town, I genuinely felt that I was walking through a Star Wars film, or generally just being part of this Star Wars universe, which really did feel great. Now, one of the main reasons why I felt this way is because you can head to a cantina, lean against a bar, and eavesdrop on NPCs talking to one another, which will subsequently give you the intel that will then appear on a map in form of a quest, which we could then go and complete ourselves. And if we do, this can then lead to a specific opening with a syndicate clan that will help us gain favor or obtain special rewards that will allow us to improve our blaster, upgrade our ship, or gain us a whole load of credits that we can then spend on new outfits at vendors. Now, I questioned the devs about this, and they said that we can choose to ignore these side quests if we want to, and that won't then change the end of the main narrative, but they will make getting to it a lot easier and also different, as it will slightly alter our path to the end of the game as we do play through it. And the same thing goes for playing these mini games like Kessel Sabak. And shout out to Mitchell, who extended my playtime and showed me how this game works in LA, with the goal of Sabak in Outlaws being to get the lowest combination of 2 cards possible, that being 1-on-1 to win 3 out of 3 games against your opponents around the table. And if you enjoy playing poker in Red Dead Redemption 2, you will enjoy playing Sabak here in this game. Perhaps we'll even win our own type of Millennium Falcon if we play against all of these high rollers and win, but let's just wait and see. Now, there's one thing that I really did not like whilst playing through my 3 missions in Outlaws, and it isn't just specific to this game, but a wider array of open world games from various different studios, and that's lockpicking and mandatory in-game puzzles, which seem to pop up several times during a quest or a linear explorative area. And Outlaws is no different here, as there's 2 different types of mechanics in this game. The first being this rhythmic lockpick minigame, where you'll need to watch and listen to the red beeps, and then match those beeps by pressing R2 on your controller in time to the same beat. So in this example, it goes yellow, yellow, and then you need to press R2 at that pace. These, of course, get more elaborate and complicated throughout the game, and I just found it a little bit frustrating, to be honest with you. And the same can be said for the slicing minigame, which you'll need to complete at various computers in specific facilities that you visit. The goal being to place 3 glyphs in the right 3 sections, which will then allow you to unlock the system. So in this example, the circle glyph is in the correct middle space, whereas the other 2 are not. So You then need to try 2 different glyphs from your selection on the left. And as you can see here, there will be a lot of them the more that you progress further in this game. But there is good news, because after my experience with these 2 mini games, I went into the settings menu and I discovered that you can turn off these mini games so they kind of auto-complete, just like in Avatar most recently. So you can skip past these mandatory mini games altogether if you don't want to do them, which I think is a big positive that they have put that in the game. Now, what about skills and abilities in this game actually? Well, now that is something that has been revamped in Outlaws, which I do think is a good thing. So do not worry, you're not going to be seeing this elaborate skill tree on your screen here with several meaningless abilities that are then mandatory to unlock before you get to the good stuff. In fact, abilities are unlocked through experts, which have their own separate menu in the game, where we will need to recruit and hire specific people scattered throughout the galaxy by completing their quests and mandatory challenges, just like in Starfield, which will then allow us to benefit from a unique skill or ability that they can then teach us. So for example, if we speak to the bartender here, he'll teach us the ability called Fast Talk, which will allow us to react quickly to nearby alerted enemies and delay their offensive reaction to us by pressing the R3 button at the right time. But first we need to perform 3 takedowns on distracted enemies and defeat 5 enemies with melee to then be able to unlock it. So in short, expect multiple different experts like this throughout the galaxy, with Julian Geraghty, the creative director, saying that these experts are pivotal to the main narrative and not just part of side content. Now, what about customization? What can we alter to our liking and what can't we? Well, as confirmed to me, transmogrification will be available as soon as we fire up the game, meaning that we can change the appearance of our jackets, trousers, blasters, the cosmetic look of our ship and speeder, as well as Nyx. I also had a look in the customization menu and can confirm there are 3 gear slots and 3 secondary gear slots, which I'm not allowed to show or discuss in detail at the moment, but each piece of the gear comes with a specific gameplay impact or bonus. And the best example that I can kind of think of that was recently implemented by Ubisoft is in Assassin's Creed Mirage, where each piece of gear has a unique buff on it, which can also be upgraded to improve that gear perk. So expect pretty much the same thing here. We can also upgrade our blaster and throwables at the workbench, which have 3 upgradable tiers that then improve the impact of our blaster bolts, such as increasing the duration of our stun shot and smoke grenades. So nothing like crazy or drastically different from any recent open world RPG game from Ubisoft, but good to see that we can customize Kay from day one. So with that in mind, I still have my kind of fingers crossed for some Mandalorian armor, Beskar armor that we can steal, or perhaps some Empire outfits that maybe we can find lying about and then wear in game. I think that would be pretty sick. Now, I've also got some more Star Wars Outlaws videos for you to get your teeth into. It should be popping up on my face right now, and I will be covering this game from start to finish. So if you haven't already done so, do subscribe, as it would be pretty awesome to have you along for this wild ride until the game kind of comes out. Big thanks to Ubisoft for inviting me to LA, specifically Liam here in the UK for being an absolute legend on our trip, as well as Nika for helping me with this breakdown. I hopefully catch you in that next video in just a moment, and as usual, coffee is on me.